Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a fun spin on all the news you need to know about. My name is Jacob Paveo, and of course I come to you each and every Wednesday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from the Great White North. I don't know if I said that yet. Either way, you can download the podcast directly on your way home from work, while you're at work, maybe on lunch at work. Depends on your hours. Whatever you can listen to it at any point in time, anywhere in the world, on any platform, unless that platform is no longer available in Russia, in which case, what are you doing in Russia? You need to leave. That basically sums up what's going on in the world right now. Things are crazy. I mean, I'm sure everyone has been at least somewhat following the news, and yeah, we have a whole lot that we could talk about, but I don't want to ramble on about Russia and their engagement, their war in the Ukraine endlessly, because I think it kind of gets, at a certain point, it's almost like, people were sick of the news because of COVID. And now with the Russia invasion, people really don't want to follow the news as it is. So I think people get sick of hearing about really bad news really quickly. And that's actually seems to be where we're at in society today, which is, I mean, it's quite sad in the sense that we are, dealing with such extreme news stories back to back at this point, coupled with the fact that the news is so prevalent. So, if you log into social media of any sort, you're going to see some form of news. And recently, especially since the Russian invasion, I'm coming towards the end of a class, I guess you could say, and I have it's about a 65-page report that's actually due on Friday this week. And I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, when I'm done working, I start working on that, and I will play video games, and I basically try to avoid the news until usually in the morning when I wake up, when I start working, I put on some different news sources and kind of catch up on what's been happening. And sometimes at night, like last night I had the hockey game on. The Leafs finally are winning games again. I say that after, they went like a week without winning, and the sky is falling. Still in third place in the division, so still looking good. But I had the hockey game on, and I was like, you know what? I'll throw on the news because, I don't need to listen to the announcers in the hockey game or whatever. I know what's happening. So I had sort of the news playing, just listening to the news while watching the hockey. And that's sort of been like as deep as I've gotten. And for some people that might be like, oh my God, you're crazy. Literally, in normal times in my life, there is constantly, the news is constantly on in some form, whether it's an online source or on, I'll have it playing on TV through an actual news channel or through YouTube or whatnot. So I've been drawing back a lot because it just gets to a point where, where we're at with the war in Ukraine. Essentially, Russia was able to capture one city now. At this point, Mariupol and Kharkiv are literally just being bombed to shit. And at a certain point, how many videos of dead people can I watch before I'm just like, this is just stupid. There's nothing that the West is going to do about it. We're going to discuss in a little bit that the U.S. has banned Russian oil and gas. Here in Canada, We're one of the lowest buyers of Russian oil and gas. It hasn't been fully sanctioned here in Canada, but I assume that it's coming. It's one of those really strange points in time where it's like, what are we going to do? You know, we're not going to go in and fight this war, because that would be essentially engaging in nuclear conflict is what would end up happening. And so because we're not going to fight this war, we're watching at a distance. We're far enough away that, you know, we can't really do much for the citizens. Certainly we can raise money and donate to different efforts and whatnot. Some people have gone over there either to fight, which, like, I don't recommend. But you know, like, let's wait because we might need to go and fight in Poland. Like, that's what I think people should think about signing up for the military, if that's sort of your deal. I do know of a few people who have gone to help with the humanitarian issues in Poland and Latvia, Romania, and similar nations bordering Ukraine, where they've now had approaching or north of 1.5 million people have fled. I was about to say emigrated, but that's not the case. They have fled, and they are refugees of Russian war, which is crazy to think about. But, you know, we're so far away that it's kind of like complete helplessness. There's really nothing we can do to assist these people because, you know, unlike much of Europe, and I've actually been surprised because I never really thought about nations relying on Russia, because here it's just not a thing. Like, we don't have Russian products. You know, our military does not use Russian weapons. We can't, like, we don't buy Russian goods. Like, when our liquor stores here, in Ontario at least, they stopped providing, all liquor stores, beer, liquor, and wine stopped providing Russian products. And it was like 4 brands, and it was worth like a few $100 million a year. That, like, it's so small. Like, all of the vodkas we buy are they're all Western European, right? Like, France makes Grey Goose. Smirnoff is an English company, and I think, or a Danish company brewed in England, or an English company brewed in Denmark, something like that. Like, I started looking into all these brands of, like, vodkas and stuff, and yeah, like, none of them are Russian. We don't buy any Russian product here. As I already said, we buy some of the, like, one of the least quantities of Russian oil. I mean, Canada exports far more oil, crude that is, than we consume. So really, it doesn't matter what we cut. It doesn't matter what we stop purchasing. We don't rely on Russia for almost anything here. Now, the United States does buy a lot more oil directly from Russia than we do, oil and gas, specifically gas, I should state. However, you know, it's really not detrimental to the American economy. North America as a whole, that being specifically Canada and the United States, could basically be completely shut off from the rest of the world. Actually, no, they certainly could be completely shut off from the rest of the world and completely be able to rely on themselves for energy production. It's a non-issue for us. However, we now need to start supplying oil for Europe, which is why now the United States sat down with Venezuela, of course, Maduro, who we do not recognize as a leader, sat down with some high-level American officials to begin discussing lifting the sanction on Venezuelan oil, since his government took over, of course, in a coup the summer before the pandemic. You may recall I discussed that in detail on the podcast. You can go back and listen to those episodes on Venezuela if you're interested. But essentially, Maduro is an illegal dictator who took over a nation, so much so that Venezuela has been, I should say, removed voting rights in a number of international organizations including NATO for a time. I'm not sure if it's been restated because you need a central, an accepted central form of government, and they did not have that for a long time. So I'm not sure if that's changed or not. I should look into that. But nonetheless, the U.S., who doesn't acknowledge Maduro as the leader of Ukraine, sent people to sit down with him and start discussing releasing oil. Now, the really interesting thing here is Venezuela has deep ties with Russia, but Venezuela has not voted with Russia in a lot of the recent international votes. So that leaves, this is much like I said with China abstaining from those UN votes, because it doesn't mean that a country supports the West. It really, really doesn't. But it also doesn't mean that they support Russia, which is the far more important side of this. Because what it comes down to is a country like China abstaining. That means that China is leaving the door open for negotiations and the opportunity to work with Western nations. And that's extremely important moving forward, because the more isolated Russia is, the more, or rather, the less likely continued conflict becomes. Because, of course, any country cannot exist without, without the citizens' support. And the more sanctions that get placed by different countries, like I bet you Venezuela, when they start selling, they're not doing it yet, but they're going to, when they start selling oil to the United States and to primarily Europe, that's where most of it we think is going to go, or they might sell to the U.S. and then the U.S. will sell to Europe. Something along those lines is what's going to happen. I bet you we're going to see them place sanctions on Russia. Because I talked about this before, where China in this circumstance is like the Soviet Union during the preamble to the Second World War, where they're just signing up to the highest bidder. And, China is going where the money is, and the money is not with Russia. And Venezuela is much the same. These countries want to last. They want to endure. They want to exist. These leaders aren't stupid. They know that violations of peace in the world, especially in their region, but anywhere in the world, make it less likely that their grandchildren can continue to run that country, which is what these dictators want, right? And I think that's part of what's happening with Putin, is he's kind of realizing that his children have no chance unless something really changes. And his, not necessarily his children, but his ancestors, his name will fade unless he does something big. Whereas Xi in China and Maduro in Venezuela are all planning on handing it down to their children, just the same way Maduro didn't inherit the country, although there is a line of secession, whatever, like with Maduro, his claim or whatever the hell is going on there. But you know what I'm saying? These are people who want to be like Game of Thrones, where they cut off everyone else's head and hand the country down to their children. And the only threat to them is the outside world, the outside threat of war. And they don't want that. Xi Jinping of China does not want war with the West, because he knows that right now China cannot sustain itself without trade with the rest of the world, and they likely never will be able to. It's not a global domination ideology anymore. Not in the sense of everyone on the planet speaking Mandarin or Cantonese. Like, that's the way that it used to be, right? That's why so many places, that's why we're speaking, well, I am speaking English right now because the English were like, they wanted to control the entire world, and the entire world started speaking English, right? It's like 60% of the world or whatever. That 60% of the land surface of the world that has English as its primary language. I mean, Canada, the second largest country in the world, the United States, the third largest country in the world, Australia, which I think is the fourth largest country in the world. So, like, it's literally all speak English, right? These are massive plots of land that this used to be the way to take over the world. Well, now there's this understanding of taking over the world through economics. And it's very difficult for people who don't grasp what's happening with these sanctions to say the West needs to do more. Today, the ruble was worth 0.85 cents per ruble. It used to be worth 4.5 cents per ruble before the invasion of Crimea. 0.85. It's fallen now like 60 or 70% from where it was just 3 weeks ago. Huge economic turmoil in Russia. Since yesterday, it had fallen from from 0.1 to 0.08, which is where it's at now, 0.08. No, that's wrong. From 0.1 to 0.08. That's correct. It's like huge, extreme turmoil for these individuals living off the ruble. So much so that Russia actually put out a statement yesterday saying that if you own government debt, it's unlikely that they will be able to pay it all back, which means if you've bought Russian bonds, the government doesn't have any money, so they can't pay it back. There's also a lot of social systems in Russia that are set to be collapsing within days. I mean, this is the point of sanctions, and I understand that people want to see action now. They want to see bombs dropped. They want to see retaliation. Well, the best way to retaliate, really, I'm just being honest about this, is to make everyone poor. Because it doesn't impact the poor people, because they were already poor, okay? In Russia, I'm referring to. But the rich people will now need to learn what's going on, and they're the ones who have children who are going to protest in the streets, and their kids are going to get arrested, and then their parents are going to get pissed and find out what's going on. And because the poor people of the population are far more likely to not have access to the internet and watch their television and think the message being given to them by the Kremlin is the truth. And so, I really think these sanctions are like the best thing that can happen. Sanctioning oil and gas is huge. And a lot of people pose the question with sanctions, especially, how do you come back from sanctions, right? People pose that question with Venezuelan oil. Well, the way Venezuela came back from that was someone fucked up more than Venezuela did, right? And I actually happen to have a position that's a little bit more hawkish than most, and that's being said with a solid knowledge of history and the reason behind the Second World War and the economic collapse of Germany. But I don't think we need to provide Russia with a way out here, because as long as Putin and the Kremlin and that infrastructure, right? Because even if Putin goes, if he's replaced non-democratically again by someone who basically does the same shit, no, like, we don't need to give an option for that party being that group of people, that nation, that government, to be welcomed back into the economic sphere of the rest of the world. And I actually am now thinking, because of the weakness that's been shown of the Russian military, that China's looking at this and going, whoa, we definitely bet on the wrong horse. Not in that they were going to work with the Western world at all, but they probably would have been better off never really supporting Russia or cutting ties earlier. And I don't think it hurts them to cut ties with Russia now because they don't want their military, which, by the way, it's important to note, we have not seen the Chinese military in action at all in a very long time. So we have no true idea what their capabilities are on modern battlefield, China that is. But we're seeing the Russian military on a modern battlefield use 14th century siege tactics that don't work against modern militaries, right? You can't surround Washington and make the U.S. submit. You can't surround Warsaw and make Poland submit. You know, it's just the weapon systems, the air defense systems. They have a 40-mile line, 60 kilometers long, of tanks, weapons, personnel, fuel. Literally, in 4 minutes, NATO could completely destroy that. I mean, like, the Canadian military has the capacity to completely destroy that alone, right? Like, I mean, you're talking about, like, smaller NATO countries, like, as far as military spending, right? France could completely destroy that with their air force alone. Russia can't compete against this. These tactics don't work. And it's strange. And I think China's seeing that and being like, whoa, we can't be partnered with these people because we're going to have to defend them, right? China doesn't want to go to war with NATO, especially in a way or in a position where they're defending Russia, who can't take Ukraine. That's like something that China's like, what the fuck? We now literally have no chance. We cannot get involved in this. Rather, not no chance, but no choice. China can't get involved with this now. Iran is back at the negotiating table. Suddenly, Iran is saying, yes, you're right, we don't need a nuclear weapon, and please buy our oil again, because, of course, the U.S. and Europe is not buying Iranian oil. And now, all of a sudden, the Iran nuclear deal is progressing more than ever because Iran has the option to sell oil to Europe and the United States in the quantities they wish that they could. And their agreement is fine. We don't need nuclear weapons. That's cool. Because they're also seeing the restraint that NATO has, which I think is super important. And it's super important that NATO doesn't get involved at all in combat in Ukraine, because it's allowing for these other things. Like, China is seeing the restraint NATO has by just holding the border and is realizing for sure, you know, when it comes to Japan, for example, that NATO is not planning a strike on China from Japan. Not that they were ever really worried about that. They talk like they are, but I think they're not stupid. So they were never really worried about that, but it does say a lot. And Iran, also seeing this, is realizing, like, NATO and the citizens of the countries within NATO are so anti-war and so anti-conflict that NATO cannot start an invasion. NATO cannot start armed conflict unilaterally. They have to be attacked first. And that makes these smaller countries, not necessarily smaller countries, but these developing countries, much more comfortable on the international stage and much more capable of coming to agreements and trusting that the United States and NATO allies are going to follow through with those agreements. And I think this is something that Putin did not foresee. I mean, obviously, he thought he would roll over Ukraine in 3 days and that this would be a joke. But, of course, as we've seen, that has not been the case. And I think that it's really shown this extreme weakness of Putin and Russian capabilities, and Putin has basically doubled down on the faith some of these countries have or didn't have before this in the United States and NATO to do all they can to avoid getting involved in direct conflict. And it has helped the U.S. especially extraordinarily. So one important thing to watch right now as we move into our next topic, which is a fun one, but this is not fun. One important thing to watch is that the Chernobyl nuclear facilities have been taken offline from the power grid, and the International Nuclear Agency, I think it's the IAEA, but it's not an English name, so I don't really know what it translates to. But they're the International Nuclear Agency. They are, every single country in the world uses them. They have open access to the safety systems at all nuclear facilities, including former nuclear facilities such as Chernobyl. And basically, when Chernobyl was taken off the power grid, they also removed the International Nuclear Agency from the ability to access the safety control systems. Now, we don't know if Russia is independently supplying power to the former nuclear facility, of course, but if not, the backup generators only have enough fuel for 48 hours. Basically, even though there is, of course, not active nuclear fission happening, the radioactive waste from the 3 reactors that did not melt down back in the former Soviet Union, all of that nuclear fuel is stored underground in cooling facilities, and it needs to be constantly cooled. So there is a constant flow of water, and that is the primary reason for the backup power systems and everything. So they have less than 48 hours now. It's been about 24 hours. So there are about 24 hours left there is about 24 hours left of fuel if Russia is not supplying fuel to the cooling towers. And if they are not supplying that fuel, there will be a major meltdown in probably the next 48 hours, resulting in a massive nuclear waste emission from Chernobyl once again. So definitely something to worry about. Russia's probably not dumb enough to make that mistake, but who knows why? Maybe it was accidentally taken off the power grid, and you know, they're now trying to fix that, but who knows if they can fix that. It's a big mess. So hopefully that gets sorted out and we end up hearing nothing about it ever again. That would be great. But that's where we're at. That is the thing to watch when it comes to the conflict in Eastern Europe right now. Now, my second story today I want to cover quickly because I thought this was really funny. There is an election going on in South Korea, and a South Korean candidate has gone viral around the world. I don't really know how popular. Actually, he is the second, he's in second place in the voting. But he's gone popular around the world because through COVID, it significantly delayed the ability for these candidates to campaign across South Korea. So instead, what they did is they created a deep fake AI system whereby his office, his campaign office, can actually type scripts, and without him ever being involved at all, they use AI to create fake video of himself. It's deep fake, if you've ever seen a deep fake video before, where he is speaking to people, and he'll answer live questions and everything, and it looks like it's him on video standing in front of a green screen. So this is definitely a first when it comes to the highest level of politics. We've seen individuals like Andrew Yang attempt to use the metaverse. He had campaign rallies in Animal Crossing, the video game, back when he was running for mayor of New York. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So basically, he recorded more than 3,000 sentences, including 20 hours of audio and video, which provided enough data for a local deepfake technology company to create his avatar, put him up in front of different backgrounds, and say anything they want him to say. So who knows if we're going to start seeing that here. Basically, what it's allowed is because of how short the actual campaign has become, again, through COVID, he's able to campaign in the larger cities like Seoul. And since he can't get to the smaller towns, which are, by my understanding, some of them particularly, really important for citizens, their vote numbers are really important to the broader election. What they're able to do is actually produce video directed at them and do live question and answers with their citizens, where it looks like he is on camera remotely talking to them. When in reality, he is not involved at all, and his campaign office are actually the ones answering the questions. So that would make for a really interesting debate stage when it's like, hey, remember when you said this? And he has to just pretend and be like, yes, I did say that, unless he didn't ever say that. It'd be a whole thing. It'd be a whole mess. So definitely not recommended. But an interesting thing. I mean, who knows? Maybe this is going to be the future of campaigning and campaign technologies. But either way, I hope everyone is remaining safe. We are actually going to be removing the mask mandates here in Ontario in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So things are really getting back to normal all over the place. We've got our vaccine mandates gone. Of course, as I just said, masks are next to go. So it's nice to see that side of the world come back to normal. Not nice to see the revision to the 1930s with war in Europe. However, really just hoping that things sort themselves out. And not sort themselves out, but get sorted out, and we can just enjoy life again. I want this summer to be stress-free. I want to sit on a beach. We can't drink on beaches here, but I do it anyways. I want to sit on a beach with a nice pina colada here and enjoying the Ontario sun. That's my plan for the summer. I hope yours is as bright and happy as mine. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into the show this week. If you have anything to say about the war in the Middle East, not the Middle East anymore, the war in Eastern Europe, or the deep fake project going on right now in Seoul, or any other topics, you can reach me at the contact page over at www.leftlearnpodcast.com. You can also check out the merch store there, and you can see pictures of me where I'm looking all intense. And yeah, you can always follow me on social media. The links are in the description for this show, wherever you happen to be listening to. If you like it, hit the subscribe button. Feel free to tell your friends and family all about it. I will be back with you next Wednesday, of course, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, each and every week. Thank you so much. I love you all. That's not true. I don't love much. Love is a weakness. Keep washing your hands. Keep wearing those masks. Keep social distancing. Keep on laughing. And keep on learning.